I am here to talk about Dan Mason's new book, titled Equitable Local Governance. Due out this month from Xulin Press, and to inform you of some things Dan and I talked about.
Yes, I got your email. You talked to Dan about the rise, fall, and re-emergence China as a global power.
Yes, Dan has been studying world power and believes that many are blinked by Eurocentric historians who have distorted and ignored the dominant role China played in the world economy between 1100 and 1800. John Hobson's brilliant historical survey of the world economy during this period provides an abundance of empirical data making the case for China's economic and technological superiority over Western civilization for the better part of a millennium prior to its conquest and decline in the 19th century.
Yes, I met with Dan before, and he told me that as China re-emerges as a world economic power, there raises important questions about what we can learn from its previous rise and fall and about the external and internal threats confronting this emerging economic superpower for the immediate future.
Yes, in our talk Dan first outlined the main contours of historical China's rise to global economic superiority over West before the 19th century, following closely John Hobson's account in the Eastern Origins of Western Civilization. Since the majority of Western economic historians, liberal, conservative, and Marxist, have presented historical China as a stagnant, backward, parochial society, and Oriental despotism, some detailed correctives will be necessary. It is especially important to emphasize how China, the world technological power between 1100 and 1800, made the West's emergence possible. It was only by borrowing and assimilating Chinese innovations that the West was able to make the transition to modern capitalist and imperialist economies.
Dan said to me that beginning in 1980 the Chinese government initiated a dramatic shift in its economic strategy. Over the next 3 decades, it opened the country to large-scale foreign investment. It privatized thousands of industries and it set in motion the process of income concentration based on a deliberate strategy of recreating a dominant economic class of billionaires linked to overseas capitalists. China's ruling political class embraced the idea of borrowing technical know-how and accessing overseas markets from foreign firms in exchange for providing cheap, plentiful labor at the lowest cost. The Chinese state redirected massive public subsidies to promote high capitalist growth by dismantling its national system of free public education and healthcare.
Yes, and that they ended subsidized public housing for hundreds of millions of peasants and urban factory workers and provided funds to real estate speculators for the construction of private luxury apartments and office skyscrapers. China's new capitalist strategy as well as its double-digit growth was based on the profound structural changes and massive public investments made possible by the previous communist government. China's private sector takeoff was based on the huge public outlays made since 1949.
Yes, and that the triumphant new capitalist class and its Western collaborators claimed all the credit for this economic miracle as China rose to become the world's second-largest economy. This new Chinese elite have been less eager to announce China's world-class status in terms of brutal class inequalities, rivaling only the U.S.
Dan says that China has nothing to compare with the U.S. overseas security apparatus because it practices a policy of non-interference. Given the advanced state of the Western imperial offensive, China has taken only a few diplomatic initiatives, such as financing English-language media outlets to present its perspective, using its veto power on the UN Security Council to oppose U.S. efforts to overthrow the independent Assad regime in Syria, and opposing the imposition of drastic sanctions against Iran. It sternly repudiated U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's vitriolic questioning of the legitimacy of the Chinese state when it voted against the U.S. UN resolution preparing an attack on Syria.
Chinese military strategists are more aware and alarmed at the growing military threat to China. They have successfully demanded a 19% annual increase in military spending over the next 5 years, 2011 to 2015. Even with this increase, China's military expenditures will still be less than 1/5 of the U.S. military budget, and China has not one overseas military base in stark contrast to the over 750 U.S. installations abroad. Overseas Chinese intelligence operations are minimal and ineffective. Its embassies are run by and for narrow commercial interests who utterly failed to understand NATO's brutal policy of regime change in Libya and inform Beijing of its significance to the Chinese state.
Dan says that China, as a world power, is incomparably stronger than it was in early 18th century. The U.S. does not have the colonial leverage that the ascendant British Empire possessed in the run-up to the Opium Wars. Moreover, many Chinese intellectuals and the vast majority of its citizens have no intention of letting its current, westernized comparators sell out the country. Nothing would accelerate political polarization in Chinese society and hasten the coming of a second Chinese social revolution more than a timid leadership submitting to a new era of Western imperial pillage.
So you and Dan had a great talk, I see. Now to our listeners, you can buy Dan Mason's new book in any bookstore. Just ask for Equable Local Governance. The book is first-rate and is about the failed war on drugs. Get your copy today. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.